Tampa Bay Bucks at the Detroit Lions, 3 o'clock. They're hosting another playoff game in Detroit, and the Lions are favored by 6.5.
Yep. Makes sense. Like Vegas is not buying into the Buccaneers as much as acknowledging that the Eagles were absolute garbage in that game.
They were. I mean, the Bucs, I mean, there was a lot of drops and just missed connections on the Bucs. Like, they could have had 500 yards and 40-plus points.
Yeah.
That was just ugly by the Eagles. Not to take any credit away from the Bucs. But they're playing pretty well, both sides of the ball. The other part of it, I don't know how much – I can't listen to all the shows I'm not on, Sam. I don't know how much you guys talked about just the horrible way that the Eagles were trying to handle the Bucs blitz. Atrocious. But over these last few weeks, I'll say this, the Lions are battle-tested against the blitz. They are battle-tested. Jared Goff going up against the Vikings 2 out of the last 3 games of the season. I highlighted those numbers in the Week 18 review show. Out of this world against the Vikings. He had like 500 passing yards across 2 games against the Vikings in their blitz-heavy attack. Not every blitz is the same. I'm just saying, historically, when you face Jared Goff, you would say, yeah, blitz him a little bit, get him a little antsy. 0 blitz he had trouble with when he was with McVay and the Rams. But the Lions have very good blitz answers that the Eagles didn't have. That's how Todd Bowles likes to play. So just matchup-wise, it's going to be a much bigger challenge, I think, for the Bucs than what we saw on Monday night against the Eagles.
Yeah, it will be. I think the good news for them is that, Detroit's defense is by far the worst part of it. So Baker Mayfield and the Bucs offense might still be able to have some good success and try and keep pace with a Detroit offense that's very good. Like I do expect the Lions to be able to put up points and, have their fair share of joy. So you're going to need the Bucs offense to keep pace. The Lions defense is a defense I think they can do that against. It's a weird game where, the Bucs did this thing of switching Tristan Wirfs from right tackle, where he'd been the best right tackle in the NFL, certainly top 2 since he came into the league, and moved him to left tackle, where I think he's still been really good, and last week was phenomenal, by the way, against the Eagles. But maybe a tick worse than he's been at right tackle. But generally, Aiden Hutchinson lines up on the right side, and it's a game where you're like, man, if we could just switch Tristan Wirfs back just for one game, maybe this would be the one to do it. But instead, it's probably going to be Hutchinson against Luke Gadecki for most of the game, and you're like, that you'd lean Hutchinson in that matchup, whereas with Tristan Wirfs, you'd probably lean Wirfs.
Couple short-armed guys right over there.
Yeah.
Gadecki in his 32.5-inch arms against what's Hutch, 33? Is he in the 32s? So I think it's a 32.5 versus 32. No, yeah. 32 and 7/8 maybe.
Yeah,
it's draft season. The Senior Bowl in a couple weeks. Let's get that arm length. Maybe I'll get tested this year.
You should.
The Senior Bowl. I need my arm length officially tested.
Let's get
Jim Nagy hopefully be on the show. Talk Senior Bowl.
32 and an eighth.
And an eighth.
Yeah, just the 1/8.
Gadecki doesn't have too many arm length advantages.
He's got him beat by an eighth.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. Keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on that in this game. No, I definitely. Look, I think the playoffs are where team weaknesses potentially get exploited. The Lions defense, and they cracked down in the second half. They cracked down in the red zone at least.
Yeah.
They have given up a slew of big plays, too many big plays. And I'll say this, sometimes you get the halftime interview where a coach is like, we really got to clean up the whatever. And Dan Campbell says, we got to clean up the big plays, can't have it. And coming out of the half, the very first play, coverage bust. But Stafford missed it, threw it out of bounds. But I think after that point, the Lions did they listened to Dan. They did a much better job of not giving up those big plays.
I would want to listen to Dan.
I would too.
If I was there.
The other interesting thing I'm not trying to take anything away from the Bucs. I thought they had open receivers left and right. I think offensive coordinator Dave Canales has done an outstanding job. You can almost see it right from the beginning of the preseason that they were actually going to try to put the defense in a bind, do stuff that Byron Leftwich wasn't really doing at the end of his run there. We're actually going to use misdirection. We're going to use play action. We're going to use our backs in the pass game to create mismatches, and they've done a great job of that. And in that game, they didn't even need Mike Evans, right? They didn't need their best players, Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, for a big chunk of it. Whereas early in the season, it was those dudes that you needed to rely on. We have to feed Mike Evans or this offense isn't moving the ball. Let's not forget, this Bucs offense scored like 21 points a game this year. For the totality of the year, it hasn't been a great offense. But the second half stretch here, it's been much better. So I think they'll be able to I think that improvement in being able to get the ball to different playmakers, get the ball to the tight ends, to Trey Palmer, has been great for this offense, and they'll have opportunities there against the Lions.
Yeah, one thing that's going to be different, though, is they're probably not going to be able to run the ball as well. Detroit has a pretty good run defense this year. The Eagles' run defense was just atrocious, was horrendous last week. And, it was like the Bucs don't run the ball particularly well, and yet Rachaad White was just like rattling off 7 yards a carry every time he touched the ball. You're like, this is not going to go well for Philadelphia.
Jordan Davis was supposed to solve all of that for the Eagles.
So that's not going to happen this week, I wouldn't have thought. Like, that's going to change the whole dynamic, and it's going to put more pressure on Baker Mayfield's shoulders. I will say, so I'm still not, I'm not buying Baker yet. I'm still fully expecting at some point it's just not going to happen. But when you watch him play now, and when you see some of the sort of mic'd up segments and those kinds of things, Baker is back, like, having fun, and has the swag back, and has the attitude and the confidence that was so apparent in his college tape, in his college career, where he was, throwing the flag down at the center, the symbol, like beaning guys that were running their warm-ups through his end zone, all these kinds of things, right? That was on that line of, is that a swag that you like, or is that too far? Like, is that a problem for you as a prospect? I think it's part of his makeup, and I think if he's in that area, it's good. It's a good thing for Baker Mayfield and his ability to play in any given week. And right now, the guy is in that kind of zone right now. He's having fun, like he's, messing with people on the sideline during games and things. Like, he's playing relaxed. And I think you probably get the best version of Baker Mayfield, whatever that is, in those circumstances.
They've done a great job with him there. I think, again, Canales, the offensive coordinator, I mean, we didn't mention it through these games. When it's Bobby against Mike McDonald in the Texans-Ravens game, those guys are like interviewing for the same jobs. Right? We're talking about the hot coordinators, Slowick, McDonald. Canales has had head coaching interviews. There's a lot of these guys around this weekend. And so Canales has done an awesome – he was the QB coach in Seattle with Geno Smith. The one comparison I will make to Geno Smith, who, once again, last year at this time – exceeded expectations, led a team to the playoffs. Baker's gotten away with some stuff this year. I think the stats are outstanding. He does quietly have 25 turnover-worthy plays. That's fourth highest in the NFL, including the playoffs. So he had the one the other day that was a dropped interception. Only 10 picks. A couple fumbles in there, but only 10 picks so far this year. So there's been, a couple of those per game. And sometimes Baker's gotten away with those. You just have to keep an eye on those particular plays. Much like Geno Smith, I think, got away with a bunch last year, and it helped the overall stat line, the overall projection, or perception. Keep an eye on that. But what you said, I think Mayfield's scrambling. Just the number of 3rd and 4s and 3rd and 5s that he's picked up with his legs, the number of 3rd and longs and big plays that he's made, it's been really impressive. And I think they've played to his strengths, Sam. Remember, like, Mayfield's not a great he had Evans with a nice deep ball the other day. He doesn't layer the ball all the time. He doesn't throw with touch well all the time. But he has a cannon for an arm.
Oh, yeah.
And he will rip those outside the numbers throws and everything. I think they've played to his strengths and how they've built the scheme as well.
I think he's just inconsistent. Like, it's not that he can't do. He can make all the throws.
It's not a can't do, but when I say, it is. That's what that is.
He's the classic, like, he can make all the throws. Baker Mayfield can make every throw in the book. He just can't make them all the time, apparently.
He's more consistent when it's ripping a seam, ripping a deep out or a comeback. That's how he likes to create those chunk plays. When you got to layer it, throw with touch, those are, not that he can't hit them, but those are more hit or miss, is what I would say. And they have those in there.
Yeah.
They have those plays in there.
How do you think the weather is going to affect the game?
Oh, that poor woman. I appreciate nuanced takes and not quote dunk. No, I don't. We don't all need to quote dunk on the woman who asked about the weather in Detroit. We don't need to quote dunk on her.
I mean, sometimes
you might need. But Peter Schrager,
funny enough to dunk on him.
Schrager, by the way, Schrager. I mean, if you're listening, man, I sent you a DM. I need an answer here.
You think that's the way to get their attention? If you're listening, I sent you a DM.
Yeah, if you're listening, I sent you a DM. Schrager, no way, Schrager.
Check your DMs.
No way, Pete Schrager's listening to us. But he came out and he said, this might be one of your, local news reporters where they're understaffed, and she probably covers politics or something, and she had to go cover the game. To which I say, okay, maybe that's true. But I do, like, if you're that person, why do you have to even ask a question at the press conference?
Right, just sit there and write down what he said.
Just write down what he said. You don't have to ask a question just because you're there.
Everybody that's there can say, he told us, or he told me, You don't need to be the one asking the question.
Why do you have to ask the question?
Yeah,
good for Todd Bowles. Like, Todd Bowles didn't.
It was such a great answer.
Mock her.
Well, kind of. He's like, you do know they play indoors. They got a dome, and then I think a lot of people that would have been it. But he was like, no, I haven't answered the question. So no, nothing specific.
But he almost pivoted to like we do have to go from our hotel
yeah,
to
he's
our
like,
bus.
it's 7 seconds out in the cold between the bus and the hotel. We're good.
Not adjust anything.
But I love that there was a pause, and he sort of went, you know what, I haven't answered her question. I should do that. And then he's like, we're not going to make any adjustments for the 7 seconds or outside between the plane and the bus and the hotel. I think we'll be okay.
Dome football does matter, though. And you see, it's easier to chuck it around. And it is harder on the defense. So,
sure.
Other side of the ball with Detroit. I love the way their offense has been this entire season. I love that they have answers in different ways to win. Jared Goff had an outstanding game last week against the Rams. And when you look at his season, Sam, you can't just take samples, but it's just trying to paint a picture of what you've seen. If you just take like 12 or 13 games, Goff is like QB1 from a grading standpoint. Just 12. So when you're watching the Lions in 12 out of 13 games, if you add that up, you're watching a guy that's played as well as any quarterback in the league. He did have that 3 or 4 game lull where he just wasn't seeing the field.
It's amazing. He is MVP outside of a 4-week stretch where he just melted down, including 2 games against Chicago, 1 game against Green Bay when they hadn't really started playing well yet, and New Orleans on the road.
Yeah,
that's the one that makes sense, and that was his best game of the 4, by the way. Like, he actually played fine in that game. It was just in that stretch.
It was
the
Chicago,
right? It's essentially
and Green Bay, who allows everybody to play
That's
well.
What I'm saying. It's essentially a 3-game stretch in 4 weeks, all of which were within the division, and 2 of which were against the Chicago Bears defense, the Green Bay defense before it started to play much better, where he had all 3 of his worst games of the season, and they all came in that one stretch that knocked him way out of number 1 graded quarterback range and way back into the pack again, and he's never really sort of dragged it all the way back. Outside of that, he's had 1 slightly below average game, and that was against the Ravens, who have arguably the best defense in the NFL. Outside of that, he hasn't had a bad game.
That's using our grades, of course, not just the production numbers or whatever. That's using our grades.
Yeah, and it's all been just consistent, really good, metronomic, accurate, productive. It's insane. But because you saw those games happen, and because it's Jared Goff, and we've seen his career, it's almost like you're waiting for that to happen again. And like last week, right, when it was Stafford versus Goff, you're like, if you have confidence in which one of these guys is more likely to melt down, you're like, Goff by a mile. And there's just always that niggling feeling with him that it could be this game.
Sometimes when you're looking at blitz versus no blitz numbers, because so many of the blitz throws are just like quick hitters, get the ball out of your hands. Sometimes the production numbers, so like how a QB handles the blitz is often based off of who he has to throw to, the scheme, having answers. Like we said, would you say Jalen Hurts is bad against the blitz? I don't know. Maybe he is, but I don't think the Eagles are doing him any favors. So I just wanted to highlight just pure passer rating. Jared Goff, 101 when he's not blitzed. 95.7 when he is blitzed. There's not much of a difference there. But like I said, at the end of the season, in those Vikings games where they're throwing a lot at them, the Lions just torched them. The Bucs did a great job the other night of, it was just like, we're going to show one thing and drop out the other way, and they had the Eagles completely flummoxed. I don't think that's going to happen with the Lions. It could. I mean, I think it still might be the strategy against Goff and the Lions.
I mean,
is to attack him because, like you said, like there's this history of, maybe he might throw it to the defense.
Right.
He does have more turnover-worthy plays against the blitz than he does a 4-man rush. But I do think the Lions with Amon-Ra St. Brown, with Sam Laporta, they have the answers to the blitz questions.
Either way, it's what they do, so it's what they're going to be doing. Like Todd Bowles blitzes. We know this. This is a constant. It's a moot point, sort of saying, should they do it? Should they go? Like, they're going to blitz. So that's one of the things you're going to be dealing with in this game is how does Jared Goff and that offense perform against the blitz? I think generally Ben Johnson has had answers to pretty much any scheme that he's run up against. I mean, think about what they did to the Minnesota Vikings. I think they might have been the first team that almost showed a blueprint, showed the gaps, the exploitations within that Vikings defense, and it was never the same for the last few games once they met the Lions. I sort of feel like the same thing's going to happen here. He will have answers to the Todd Bowles blitz defense, and I can't really see a world without turnovers being involved where the Lions offense doesn't have quite a lot of success.
At the end of the season, I'm not going to say anything. Devin White had been battling injuries. He had that one outstanding game where he played well. Mm-hmm. But KJ Britt has been cutting into his playing time. KJ Britt had 33 snaps the other night. Devin White just 26. It's taken a few years, but I think the Bucs overall maybe soured on Devin White heading into this season. If he's out there, it's another one of those offensive coordinator maybe target on his back. You can make him wrong, use his aggressiveness, use his speed against him. Ben Johnson, the way he schemes things up, just something I would keep an eye on because this whole weekend, Ben Johnson, another hot offensive coordinator name who's probably going to become a head coach. It's another opportunity for him to shine. And outside of Levante David, might have some opportunities against these Bucs linebackers. Britt has played really well. Just saying, if Devin White is out there, certain packages, whatever it might be, something to keep an eye on. Mm-hmm. And Devin White did most of what they've pretty much done is blitzed him the majority of the time. So they're pretty much just using Devin White to rush the passer, which is what he does best. Much like former Lion Jarrad Davis. Remember that was like what he did well? Yeah. Rush the passer.
Levante David still trucking at his age. Still, I think, one of the better coverage linebackers in the NFL. Him going up against rookie Sam Laporta is going to be interesting to see. Remember, Levante David has probably done the best job of shutting down prime Travis Kelce. Laporta, whatever he is, he's not Kelce. He's also coming off that knee injury. He's probably not 100%. On the other hand, Levante David is getting older, so he's probably not what he was when he was at his prime. But that, I think, is a really fun one-on-one matchup to watch.
Yeah, it's a great one. The Lions, too, just going back because we like to talk about the draft. Laporta, Gibbs has been really good. I like the way they've used him. Jack Campbell's played a lot of football.
They look like
got some work to do.
They nailed their draft.
Yeah.
But it was, we said that at the time, right?
Brian
that
Branch.
You can't really argue with the players they drafted. It's simply the order and position at which they drafted them that you would quibble with. But the more picks they made in that draft, the better the draft looked, I think. Overall, you came out of that draft saying, okay, I don't love the positional value or the sort of positions that they drafted them, but the players, I think they're going to end up with a real haul.
All right, one more matchup I want to talk about. Lions, one of the better offensive lines in the league against this Bucs defensive front. Mm-hmm. You always mention that why can't Vita Vea just bench press centers and guards every down? Because when he does it, it looks like he's unstoppable. He had elements of those plays the other night.
I really don't understand that.
The Bucs, every time the Eagles had a weird game plan too because they didn't really try to run the ball. They didn't try to get the ball out to the perimeter where they had success previously against the Bucs. They were just banging their head against the wall, and the Bucs did a really good job of crowding the line, making them one-dimensional. If the Bucs play like that up front against the line, can they do that up front against this Lions offensive line, I guess is the question.
Vita Vea is like a permanent X factor in any game because in any play, he could just take a guy, throw him out of his way, and go make an insane play single-handedly. Or, stop an unstoppable push play at the goal line because he's Vita Vea. He can do that and change games single-handedly. But for some reason, he only ever does it 2 or 3 times a game, and you can never predict when they're coming. So, consequently, they might not make an effect on the game whatsoever, right? If he does something like 1st and 10 on a drive randomly in the game and they just pick it up anyway, made no difference. But if he does it on 3rd and 8 and he actually stops the drive, Vita Vea can change the game for you. So, I think he's this complete wild card in any game you play where he can change the performance based off the absurd things that he's able to do. I just will never understand why he's not able to do it more consistently.
All right, let's make some picks. Lions by 6.5 here, Sam.
By
the way, they did play week 7, week 8, whatever it was. Detroit won 20-6 in Tampa.
Since I am perpetually out on Baker Mayfield, I will go with the Lions.
Oh, wow. I'm sick of agreeing with you, so I'll take the Bucks. How's that for
Nice.
an answer?